Hey guys, really quick, just jumping in to say that our memory card ran out of room, so we lost about half of this episode. But that's fine because I listened to it and it actually cut off in a really good spot where, Tammy and I were starting to talk about action steps. So this week we're going to really dig into the topic at hand. And then next week we're going to talk action steps, coping, and how to kind of deal with it all if you are dealing with the unnamed topic. So keep listening to find out what it is we're talking about. Welcome to the Sugar and Spikes podcast, a show for everyone trying to navigate business and life without losing their minds. I'm Dez, a coach and consultant who is entirely overeducated, habitually overdressed, and obnoxiously honest.
And I'm Tammy. I'm a psychologist. Was I supposed to say more?
You know what? Enough said. We talk about mindset, mental health, and making it all work in the big, bad business world.
One quick note. We may be mental health professionals, but we're not your mental health professionals.
So, enjoy the show! Welcome to another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. And this is, I don't know, I'm like reaching for a pillow. I'm kind of excited because, well, for one, Tammy and I haven't seen each other in a minute.
It's true.
And a lot of stuff has kind of gone down.
Yep. As always.
Yes. Like, show me a week where things don't go down.
Gosh, oh my gosh.
But really, this is going to be a good show. This is going to be a really good episode because part of the magic of Sugar and Spikes, and it is magical, but a part of the magic is it's us shooting the shit.
That's true. Pretty much that's what it is. In educated ways.
Yeah. And this week's topic is just so on point and something I think so many people can kind of identify with. But I want to set the tone, or I want to set the stage, I guess.
Okay.
Because the topic that we are talking about is it's referred to as millennial burnout.
Right.
And I want to be very clear for everybody listening that for the sake of this episode, when we say millennial burnout or reference it, we're not talking about like the age group.
Yeah.
Like I've decided that in my brain because I've been reading about it a bit recently. And I started to identify it as like this societal phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is.
Yeah, that really transcends generations.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just fun to, like, not fun on my part, but like it's
Mhm.
become like trendy to like
Mhm.
bag on millennials.
Oh, 100%.
Right? So
like
like
I do it too.
yeah, so it's just kind of like the thing to do. So
Mhm.
like I don't want to jump on that bandwagon here.
Yeah. So I think, and we'll get into this in the episode, but millennial burnout, I've kind of defined it as different than traditional burnout, which is why it needs that adjective. And unfortunately, it's a generational adjective, but we're not talking about it in terms of generation.
Yeah, it's like a condition.
Yeah.
More than like go take a vacation and lay on the beach and
Mhm.
you'll feel better and re-energized and come back to work. Like it's more than that, right?
Yeah. And so this topic, I kind of decided on this topic earlier today when my lunch was cooking and I was like sitting down petting my dog, and it had been like a pretty decent day. Submitted a lot of projects and stuff for work, had good meetings. Things were going well, like really well. Um I got my title for my car, like I paid off my car.
Nice.
So all these things happened earlier in the day, and I was making lunch, and also just to additionally set the scene, my house is the cleanest it's been in a long time. And I'm sitting there watching my frozen meal spin in the microwave, and I just had this continuous thought of I really need to my shit together.
Mm.
Like, that just went through my mind, like, 5 times, and I realized it, and I felt this pressure where, like, everything feels out of control, and, like, I'm treading water and all these things, when going back to what seemed maybe tangential, the situation of my day, things are things generally seem under control, which ties to millennial burnout.
Yeah.
Tammy, would you like to share kind of the premise of millennial burnout?
Sure. So really it's this condition, right?
Mhm.
And I think of it as condition because I think of it's not a fleeting thing. It's
Mhm.
not something we can just kind of vacation our way out of.
No.
But really it's this idea of like many of us have been kind of ingrained with this idea that we have to be constantly working all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
And if we are not, then something's wrong with us,
Mhm.
right? And so when we do that over and
Mhm.
over and over, we just get to a point where we're just like saturated
Mhm.
and can't do other things. And so
Mhm.
what ends up happening is you see kind of, the quote unquote adulting things that
Mhm.
just can't seem to get done
Yeah.
because you're, you know, grinding yourself into the
Mhm.
ground. And then you're like, why can't I do that? Like, why can't I go shopping for groceries?
Mhm.
Why can't I like do this thing that's
Mhm.
been sitting there forever that
Yeah.
like, I need to mail the form to the DMV, but yet
Mhm.
I haven't mailed it and now I like don't have plates for my car.
Mhm.
Just these kind of basic day to day, but those daily things kind
Mhm.
of fall away because we're constantly working all the time. And when you constantly work all the time, you burn yourself out. You have nothing left and no reserves. So that's basically
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah. And pretty much, one term that I read was this idea of like life optimization. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're so focused on maximizing productivity. How can I squeeze the most into one day and things like that? And I mean, I'm so guilty of that. It's
Oh,
ridiculous.
same.
And like, I was thinking about it last night. It was maybe 10 o'clock or so at night, and I get up relatively late. Like, I work from home, I don't have a commute. Team I work with is in different time zones. I have a bit of flexibility with my morning. So it's not jam packed at the start. But from the moment I get up until 11 o'clock at night, my day is planned.
Hmm.
And like, I know it is coming up in the next hour, in the next 15 minutes, all these things. When I'm married, I have a dog. I have no kids. I have no commute. Like, I don't have those other external things, but I have optimized my life so much that I still feel like there's no time.
Hmm. And that when you do take time for the kind of those mundane things like shopping at the store or making
Mhm.
yourself lunch, like you feel bad about it.
Mhm.
You're like, "Oh, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. I don't have," or I think kind of alternatively, not I don't have time for that. I just can't. I
Yeah,
can't. I
I'm
can't.
too tired.
Yeah.
I have no space for that. Like, it's it's weird because it's like the last boundary.
Mhm.
Like, with the things that need to get done, it's still the no.
It's like your last desperate like I need
Uh-uh.
something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
mhm.
man. Yeah, cuz I mean, we even talked about burnout before, but this is different.
It's oh, the word is escaping me. It's a chronic state.
Right.
It's not acute, I woke up and I feel sick and can't go into work because the stress has gotten to me. It's this chronic, like, low-level ulcer.
I mean, it's almost like the difference between like I always go mental health, but
Mhm.
between like a mental health disorder that kind of like waxes and wanes
Mhm.
versus a more entrenched like
Mhm.
personality disorder,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
This is basically like the fundamental way you live your life,
Oh,
the
yeah.
fundamental way that you
Mhm.
relate to your work and
Mhm.
you relate to the things you have to get done
Mhm.
that and it's not working,
Yeah.
right? Anymore. Like you get to
Mhm.
that point where it just doesn't work anymore. Like the thing, like, you know,
Mhm.
so that's kind of how it helps me to think about it.
That's really good. I think likening it to a personality disorder, I mean, it totally speaks to me because that's my lens,
Right.
where it's like that's how you interact. It's how you interact with the world, but also, so I would challenge you on that.
Okay.
Given the situation, and maybe I'm wrong, but given the situation, um, and with what we know of personality disorders and everything, with personality disorders, it's how do you manage with this? Do you think it's still that same view with like millennial burnout, or do you think that it's possible to shift and actually break out of that?
Well, just like we know that like personality disorders can get better with treatment, right?
Mhm.
Like we used to have this
You can,
idea
like,
that you
subside
couldn't,
symptoms.
right?
Mhm.
And improve functioning quite a
Yeah.
bit. You could do that here too.
Mhm.
I think, but what you're really talking about with millennial burnout is like this fundamental core belief
Mhm.
about how you need to be living your life.
Mhm.
So it's not just like, oh, I need to adjust my schedule and
Yeah.
everything will be better, right?
Mhm.
Like those kinds of problem solving, short term, solution focused things, I think there's a place for those. But when
Mhm.
you're talking about core beliefs,
Mhm.
this idea that I should quote unquote always be working, it's
Mhm.
not like, oh, just change your point of view. Like, oh, I didn't think about that. Like,
Well, and always be productive.
right, like always be productive, right?
Mhm.
So like if that's your core belief and
Mhm.
that's the way you view the world and that's your
Mhm.
lens and the thing you believe you need to be doing,
Mhm.
then it's not exactly like you can problem solve your way out of that simply,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
Cuz all you're going to do is problem solve ways to work in
Mhm.
more kind of I I'm sorry it's late, like a more undercover way, like a more
Yeah.
sneaky way. Like you're like, "Okay, well, I won't do this that's explicitly a work task, but I'm going to do this other thing that ends up being a work task."
Well, no, it's 100% true because I think with like the goals and stuff that I had for the new year and with my whole thing around like focus and everything, that was like it was looking back now and in this moment, I'm like, maybe almost like an unhealthy choice to be more productive.
Mm.
Where like
To
I've started
optimize your
to
productiveness.
optimize my, yes, exactly.
So not to cram more things in, but to improve the quality of it.
But I've ended up like cramming more stuff in.
Yeah.
Because even with, I think on one of the episodes recently, I talked about the fact that I started learning Polish.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
because I was using the app to not be on the Facebooks. Um, but
You sneakily just like traded one thing for another.
yeah, well, and it was, it just a few minutes a day and it'll be fine, or like whenever I'm killing time, cool. But now it's like I wake up and hitting 100 XP on Duolingo is one of the very first things I do every morning.
Okay.
And it's like now on my to-do list and very much I read, I do Duolingo, and then I have breakfast, and that is my
So I think that I think that you make a perfect it's in a perfect example of what I was
Yeah.
just talking about, right?
Uh-huh.
So you try to adjust
Mhm.
to focus more to improve the quality of what you're doing, not the quantity, to
Mhm.
have more enjoyment, but you inherently take that thing that you really wanted to do and you thought would be great, which was learning
Mhm.
Polish, which would enhance your life, and you turned it into a work task, right?
Yeah.
Go you. So like that's what I mean when it's like
Mhm.
when you can't do like small, it's not going to be a small fix.
Mhm.
You're talking about fundamentally changing the way a person views the world to
Mhm.
really change this,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
that, yeah. So you made my point.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
like, I was right.
I mean, ultimately, like, what do you think it all stems from?
I think it stems, well, I think it's different for everybody, right?
Mhm.
Because it depends person.
Mhm.
But I mean, when you think about if you've been taught this your whole life. So
Mhm.
you're talking about it's like this combination of core beliefs
Mhm.
with a combination of like a healthy dose of societal shame for
Mhm.
not being able to accomplish certain things, right?
Mhm.
Like we like to bag on millennials, like you can't do basic adulting things.
Mhm.
But so you get that healthy dose of shame like
Mhm.
thrown in on top, which makes you work even harder, but then
Mhm.
you can't accomplish more, so more shame, right? So I think
Mhm.
it's kind of this back and forth, kind of stuck in this cycle of
Mhm.
maybe those two things, but
Yeah.
not specifically for everybody, but kind of more generally.
Mhm. I think it's like an I don't know why, but, like, in my mind, like, I see, like, something oozing, like, this insidious example of nothing is perfect, and you cannot do it all.
Right.
So when you're overachieving and maybe overcompensating, like, in all these other ways, like, showing up, like, crazy at work or feeling significant, like, financial pressures because of, like, let's use millennial reasons, right? Like, student loans and all
Mm.
these other things, um, or, like, pressures of healthcare. Like, I didn't realize this. I didn't realize, like, a type of pressure that I felt for not having insurance until I stopped feeling it once I got insurance this year.
Right. It becomes just so much a part of it that you like, right,
Yeah,
selective attention. We can't pay attention to everything. So you kind of forget that it's there. And then when it gets kind of taken away, you're like,
yeah,
oh, I didn't realize how stressed I was about that.
yeah, and, like, so we're holding on to all of these stressors.
Hmm.
Yeah, groceries are going to fall by the wayside or, dry cleaning, like, doing laundry, things like that. They're indicative of the fact that too much is going on.
Right.
And a lot of people can look at that and be like, "Oh, lazy millennials," or like people don't have their shit together. But
But
it's
that's like that stigma and shame, right?
mhm.
Like, yeah. Don't even get me started on that. That's another topic
Mhm.
because I'll go on and on.
Yeah. Well, and there's one article that I was looking at and there's this really good quote that I think explains so much of it. Um And it's talking about burnout in the bigger picture, but it definitely ties to the idea of millennial burnout. Burnout is a response to prolonged stress and typically involves emotional exhaustion, cynicism, or detachment and feeling ineffective.
Hmm.
Like, if I think about all the things that I've let slide, all those things come into play.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Right. So, like, we can adapt at a certain point to
Mhm.
stress, right? So, we have like the stress happens and our body kind of, or we kind of arise to the occasion, and we actually might even be feeling like we're energized or like doing better, or right, because we're initially can like resist that. But
Mhm.
then we get to the point of exhaustion where we can't tolerate it in a chronic state.
Mhm.
Right? So that initial like, "Hey, I thrive under stress. Hey, I can do this. Hey, I got all this. Like I
Mhm.
can manage all this," kind of eventually becomes, "No, I can't," because you
Mhm.
can't sustain like that heightened, like if we want to talk about science, right?
Mhm.
Like general adaptation and all of that, like you can't maintain that second state of like resistance to
Mhm.
the stressor for long enough
Yeah.
for that long.
What do you think about the idea of like resilience as a protective factor? Like
Resilience?
like I I see that and it's one of those things where I'm like, that's just a clever way of making it more keep going and not
I think resilience can maybe prolong, well, if not necessarily resilience, but protective factors, let's say,
mhm.
can prolong the amount of time you can stay in that kind of level 2 resistance,
Mhm.
can prolong how long you can balance all those things.
Mhm.
But eventually, risk factors can overtake protective factors,
Mhm.
right? And so if you're just overwhelming all of that, you're still going to get to this point, right? And you
Mhm.
can be resilient and bounce back. But to do that is really going to take some work and some
Mhm.
thought and maybe some rethinking about what it means to you to be a
Mhm.
valuable person, what it
Yeah.
means for your self worth, what it means, right? So, like
Mhm.
all this work we kind of do with folks, like, I think about folks who've had a significant injury
Mhm.
and now maybe they can't run and they used to run. So now how do they think of themselves if that was a core piece of their identity and they can't do it anymore? How do they find meaning and worth and
Mhm.
identity? So this is kind of the same. If you find meaning and worth and identity and being busy and productive and all of that, and now suddenly you can't do it anymore because you're too burned out, like in this
Mhm.
chronic state, well, how do you think of yourself then?
Mhm.
How do you find worth, identity, feeling like you're productive and doing something
Mhm.
meaningful when you can't do that?
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of work
Yeah.
and a lot of emotional kind of shit goes on, right?
Well, looks like that's the end of this episode. Next week, Tammy and I are going to be back with tips and tricks you can do to kind of deal with either millennial burnout or chronic burnout, whatever you want to call it, because it is different. It's something that isn't as kind of easily solvable as just being burnt out. I mean, you can't just spa day it away.